Okay, my name is Olive Bryanton, and I live in Hampshire, Prince Edward Island, which is just about 9 kilometers outside of Charlottetown. I am an older adult. I just finished my PhD, and I guess you would say I'm a lifelong learner, but I'm also an advocate for older adults. I am 82 now. I have 5 children, 2 boys and 3 girls. And my youngest son was going to be alone for the summer, and because the girls were working, and I thought this is not a good thing, so I better be home for the summer. So I asked the doctor I was working with if I could take the summer off, and he said yes. But he was almost to retirement age, and he had already given up the obstetrical part of his work, and that was the area that I really loved. So I just thought, I need to go back to school. I need to make a change. So I went back to school in 1980 and got my undergrad degree. Then I worked at various things and with the Gerontology Association, with the Seniors Federation, and other nonprofit organizations. Then decided I needed to do something different. I got a job on campus and in the Center on Health and Aging, and you kind of can't be on campus without learning. So I decided I better do my master's. And my area of interest has always been older adults. So transportation was one of the areas that I was really concerned about. So my master's study was on older women who had to give up driving. And it was such a devastating thing for them. So it was in a way, it was an eye-opener, but I knew, and I felt, if I ever had to give up driving, I'm not sure what I would do. So it was an enlightening study, and of course, just another area for advocacy. Advocate, you realize that in order to make change happen, you have to have evidence. And you can only get evidence through research. And I really wanted to become a better researcher. So it took me from 2009 to 2013 to actually bite the bullet and apply to do my PhD. I talked with the coordinator of the graduate studies and the faculty of education, and she was very supportive of the idea and recommended that I do put an application in, which I did. My biggest problem was in the faculty of education, there's not a lot of work around older adults. It's mostly with the youth. So I had to find someone who was connected with the faculty to be my supervisor. So I found a retired faculty member from Dalhousie who was retired on PEI, but she was an adjunct at the education department on campus. So I contacted her, and she very graciously agreed to take me on if I got accepted. So, and I did get accepted, and so she became my supervisor. The supervisor I had for my master's had been at UPEI, and she had a gerontology background, but then she's now in Dalhousie. So she became a co-supervisor, and I had for most of the time I had 2 other committee members. One was a quantitative researcher, and sometimes I thought, am I doing the wrong thing by having a quantitative researcher in a qualitative study. But as it turned out, it was perfect. It really was perfect. Uh, the method I used was Photovoice. So I gave my participants a camera to take pictures of what supported or limited their ability to age in place. So my participants were women 85 and older, living in rural communities in Prince Edward Island. And I had 10 participants from across the province. Their ages were 85 to 91 when I first met them. Um, with Photovoice, it's not the swooping in and doing an interview. They were involved for 8 months. And that is really amazing, because my real goal was to make older women visible, because they have a tendency to become invisible, and also to let their voice be heard. And both things were accomplished. The main goal of Photovoice is social change. So within this study, in order to have social change happen, you have to share what you've learned. So each of the participants were able to submit 4 photographs to my study that was depicting whether the support they were receiving or some of the barriers they might be encountering. So in order to share that knowledge, we held what we called a knowledge sharing open house, and we held it on campus. And each of the women had their 4 photographs there. We borrowed music stands from the music department, and I framed their photographs, blew them up and framed them. So they were standing there with their 4 photographs, or sitting. We made sure they had chairs too. And as people came in, they went directly to the women. Like I'd said to them, this is going to be your day. And they laughed, and oh yeah. But they realized it was their day, because they were the people who were asked questions, and uh, it went amazingly well. One of the people, like we invited friends, family, academics, and policymakers. And one of the people who came was the then minister responsible for seniors. And so she came, she spent a lot of time with the older adults. And 6 months or 5 months later, she announced a new program called the Seniors Independence Initiative. And she publicly announced that she was inspired by my study and the opportunity to talk to the women. So later on, I was talking with her, and I said, really, what did you mean when you said you were inspired? She said, I got your invitation. I came to support your study. I walked into that room with absolutely nothing in my mind. I walked out, my head was spinning. And when I looked at the program she developed, I saw their photographs saying, this is what we need, this is what we need, this is what we need. I was not allowed to choose, I was not allowed to phone women I knew and say, would you be involved? I had to publicize my study, and the women themselves had to contact me. But the 10 women who were involved were extremely interested. Now, something else evolved out of this study that was unexpected, and that was a documentary this month on CBC Point of View. And so 4 of those women, of my women participants, were heavily involved in the documentary as well. But they all came out with amazingly different reasons why older women should be recognized and seen as important in our society. The main goal of my study was to try to refute a bit of ageism and to make the women visible and to hear their voices. And for me, trying to be sure it was their voices and not mine that was in the study, it was, I think Photovoice really allowed that to happen. And then, of course, with the documentary, their voices are very strong. So we're doing.
That's
And as a result of the documentary, I got a lot of feedback, an awful lot of feedback. People saying, "Thank you for giving me the confidence." Uh, I am a student myself. I was a student. I gave up. Now I'm going to go back. So I got messages from women who are back in doing their PhD in their 60s and 70s, and it was really great to feel that I gave them the little push they needed to continue on, because sometimes it can get very grueling and you wonder why you're doing it, or there's so much ageism out there that, even my committee members at our very first meeting, they called themselves Team Olive, and they were Team Olive all the way through and still are. So even their colleagues would say to them, "Well, why are you wasting your time on an older woman in her studies?" It's just society is so youth orientated, and they don't really see the value of older adults learning. So I'm hoping this will encourage more women to get involved. What I'd love to make happen, and I haven't done anything about it yet, but I'm going to, is have some kind of a platform where women who are doing their masters or their PhDs can get together and chat and talk about, you know, what they're going through and getting advice from one another. I think that would be marvelous. I also think that women need a platform of some kind. Like I was thinking of the 10 women in my study. It's impossible for them to get together to meet face to face. But if there was some kind of an electronic platform that they could meet and chat. I'm quite involved with Age Well, and the thing that I really like about Age Well is it is mostly technology in older adults, but they firmly believe that nothing should be developed without advice from the older adults themselves. And so I really like their process of having older adults involved as advisors on various committees. If older adults are going to be advisors, they need ways to connect with one another so they can learn from one another really what are the issues, how are we dealing with them. One of the things the women said within my study was, it was great to get together because part of Photo Voice is also group meetings. So they all got together and talked with one another at our meetings, and they learned so much there, as did I. They, they just talk about, oh, well, this happened to me, and this is what I did. And so it's the practical knowledge that people need to know, but they also need to know what's going on out there and how are people dealing with things and what needs to change. So if we are going to have older adults as advisors, then we need to have some kind of platform where they can get together on occasion. And I think there needs to be a variety of platforms, like women 85 and older living in rural communities have totally different issues and concerns than women 60 to 70 kind of thing. Um, Women have totally different concerns than men. So I would love to see platforms for women in various ages, for men in various ages, and also for the combination, because I think we need to hear it all. I guess the willingness of people to participate and for such a long period of time, their willingness to really talk about their life and what's happening within their life. Um, the agency these women had, they were quite amazing. I mean, they knew what they wanted, and they generally knew how to get it. Now, they didn't, they know what they want. For example, one of the biggest things, of course, is transportation. And what's going to happen when I can no longer drive? And that was a concern for every one of them. Two of them did not drive, and you could see the barriers they were facing. Um, for an example, one woman talked about how she loved to do her own banking, but was not always able to do that. So she was kind of forced to give her banking card and her PIN number to a family member. Now, that's opening her up for abuse. Not to say they ever would, but none of us ever think our family would abuse us. But statistics show that it is our families who often do abuse older adults. So certainly the importance of family living close by. Every one of these women had a family member living within 20 kilometers. And that's so very important. The women had from 1 to 10 children. Three had 10 children. So very large families at the time. But the importance of the families there. The 6 of the women had a teaching background. And an example of what occurs when you're raising a large family and you're taking the time off to raise those children so that they're not a burden on society. You're taking on that responsibility. Now, one woman in particular worked part-time, and as a result, she's now retired, and her Canada pension is $26 a month. So, I mean, how do you live on that? She was doing this so her husband could work full-time and get a good pension. And one of the questions I asked all the women was, do you feel you have the resources you need to continue the lifestyle you've chosen? And this particular woman said, as long as my husband is alive. And her husband is no longer alive. His pension has been reduced by 50%. So her expenses have not been reduced by 50%. They've been reduced by, the groceries a bit, and then maybe some medical issues. But so that was her biggest concern, and it was certainly a concern for all of the women. What can we do? I only had 2 women who were still had their spouses, but this particular woman also was very much a caregiver. And I guess the resourcefulness of these women, between our first group meeting and our second group meeting, this same lady was waiting for a hip replacement. So between the first and second group meeting, she whipped in and had her hip replacement done. In the meantime, she's a caregiver. She's looking after her husband. She's still involved in the community. They were extremely involved, and I think the community involvement, the vibrancy that it created with the women, because they were so involved, and it was not just I'm belong to the seniors group or I belong to the church group. They had very active roles, and they were leadership roles. So it really opened my eyes to how important it is to be involved and to really take on roles where you're responding to the people who, and you're still making a difference and you have a purpose. So they were very amazing. I think I've learned a lot of things from them. I have a lot of what's next. Actually, I started back to work. So I'm doing research part-time. I've been involved I've been asked to do a lot of speaking. I'm involved in a lot of conferences. So one of the things I think that we really need to look at is we have to stop looking at vulnerabilities and look at capabilities. We have to see, we know everyone has capabilities, and we need to look at those capabilities and say, okay, how can we build on those capabilities to help that person remain independent? So I think we've missed the boats. And when we hear our governments talk about aging as a problem, I mean, that's very discriminating. It's very ageist. And since when did aging become a problem? It's a normal process of life. So, we need to get the message out there that it's okay to age and that aging people are not vulnerable, that aging people come with all kinds of capabilities. And like every other age group, sometimes you need support to do some things. I mean, we support all other ages, so why not older adults, and why not do it with willingness and stop calling them a burden and stop calling them as vulnerable people, because they're really not. They certainly do, and they don't want more than they need. They really don't. They, transportation is such a huge issue. And why can't we provide transportation that supports people to stay where they want to be, where they've been known all their lives, where they've been involved and continue to be involved? I don't understand it. I don't understand the lack of home care that's provided. All our money is going toward the medical model. We're forgetting that the social aspects of our health are equally as important. So, to be able to connect with family, friends, and contribute, I think that's are so important. I think we can learn a lot from the Scandinavian countries how to care for older adults. I love the students living with older adults in their own home. It's so beneficial to both. Or they take them out for rides and things like that. There's just so much they can learn from one another. Making sure there's ways that people can connect. Like I suspect Nova Scotia is as bad as here when it comes to rural internet. It's disgusting. It's worse than the dial-up used to be. And one of my women was very techy, and she did her banking online, and she's 88. She does her banking online. She uses a computer all the time, and she gets so angry at the internet service that she said, I'm not going to vote again until they do something with the internet service. But she's not the exception, because a lot of older adults are using computers. Some of them have stopped because of the annoyance of the internet service you have. So just need to take into consideration some of the practical things that people need. It's just, there's so much people can do if if society would stop saying you can't because of your age. You can't do this. You're supposed to do this when you were this age, and you're supposed to do this. And now that you're this age, you're supposed to be in the rocking chair and not, I think as a society, we are doing everyone a disservice, and they're not reaching their potential of what they can do. Definitely not. If you said to someone, do you suffer any ageism? They'd say no. But yet in the next breath, they'll say how the doctor told them, at your age, what do you expect?
Yeah.